Hi everyone, my name is Stephen Stewart. I am the CEO of Power Ore, and I'm very happy to be here on a sunny spring day here to talk to you about how we see copper in a COVID world, and more importantly, how does that play into Power Ore. I think we've got copper in Quebec, and I think we're in a really good situation, but you got to look a little bit deeper than what's happening on the surface, and I'm going to explain what I mean by that. So let's get right into it. Everybody knows the forward-looking statement. So this is the agenda for our webinar here today, and we're going to be talking about our thesis on copper, more importantly, our thesis on copper in Quebec in light of this COVID-19 situation. A lot of people have their views on how the base metal markets are going to react, and I think they're right, but I only think they're right in the short term. We're going to talk pretty briefly about why copper in Quebec is so advantageous. I've said this before, but I'll say it again. Then we're going to get more specifics about the Opemiska, what it was, meaning we're well known for our Springer and our Perry mine, the fantastic drill results we had in the summer of 2019 and how we're going to build upon that. Now we're going to talk about what is Opemiska now, and what I mean by that is the announcement we made on February 28th, that is, right before the PDAC, and it's gone completely unnoticed as a result of what's going on, and that's understandable, but I think the market has totally missed the announcement that we made, and we have increased our land package by tenfold. Contiguous, we acquired 2 new mines to encompass the entire, what used to be known as Falconbridge's Opemiska copper mine complex. We have all the mines, the gold mines, the copper mines. We've got it all, I'll tell you that. And then, of course, what are we going to do with it? And there are 2 different simultaneous strategies that we're going to be moving this thing forward. Fourth, we're going to talk about the Chibougamau district. I really do believe this is the most important copper district in Eastern Canada, maybe Canada, but certainly Eastern Canada. It's pulled out 1.5 billion pounds of copper historically. About 1.4 billion of those, I might add, were on our properties. And I think there's a real renaissance happening there. And then we're going to close it out with the Ryder transaction. We announced that, again, bad timing through no fault of our own, but we announced it on February 25th. We sold our Man Mine, which used to be our focus in Power Ore before we acquired the Opemiska. And the truth is we weren't focused on it. We came across a really interesting opportunity with a really interesting guy. And it's going to be called Baseload Energy, and it's going to be a brand new company. But you're going to have to stay to the end to find out what exactly I mean. And it's a little teaser, but do stay to the end to hear this great news. So, talking about our copper and our thesis, how COVID is going to impact the base metals. And I say here, you know, the COVID policy response. And there's been all sorts of policy response. And honestly, the policy is a bit of a mishmash. But the bottom line is this. I believe a number of very important things are going to eventually fall out of this once everybody is healthy and once the dust is settled, first and foremost, and most importantly. There's going to be massive unemployment. So outside of the health impacts, the economic consequences are going to be vast. I do believe that this is going to bode very well for base and industrial commodities. In particular, copper. I think copper will be the primary beneficiary out of that because of its unique properties. So while everybody's focused on gold, as am I, and how that's going to play out because of the continued debasement, what I think is getting lost is basically there's going to be a New Deal. A New Deal 2.0, just like Roosevelt did in the Great Depression. America went on an infrastructure, roads, bridges, tunnels, airports, trains. They went on a binge. And that is exactly what I believe is going to happen in the United States. Donald Trump's already talking about it, but that to me seems obvious. Why? Because people need jobs. Why even more so? Because America's infrastructure is totally crumbling. Have you been to LaGuardia Airport? Have you, driven on the interstate? Have you lived if you live in Toronto like I do, we've got gleaming glass condos everywhere, but our sewers, our subways, and our roads can't handle it. All of North America's infrastructure was built for a populace of the 1950s. We have grown exponentially in size, yet we haven't caught up. We are generations behind the Asians in terms of our infrastructure that we require to be competitive. I think the world has been looking for an opportunity to rebuild our infrastructure so that we are competitive with the East, who is growing and nipping at our heels very quickly, and we need to catch up. So again, I think gold is getting all the attention, and I think gold is going to play very well, short-term, medium-term, long-term, because of the debasement. And that's the popular narrative that everybody's talking about, and I believe they're right. However, people are quite bearish on all the other commodities. And while I think in the short term, that's fair, especially as mines are coming off, but there's going to be a huge demand for copper, nickel, iron ore, etc. And copper is going to be the #1 beneficiary of that. Secondary, what's going to happen is there's going to be a major movement to regain control of our supply chain in friendly hands. I think we have learned that we, in a time of crisis, which everybody's forgot what a true crisis was, you cannot rely even on your closest friends, unfortunately. But you certainly can't rely upon those on the other side of the world. And so there is going to be a little bit of nationalist fervor. And if you, agree or not agree, it doesn't matter. What's important is that, and it is important, is that Canada and the US, but I'm talking about as a Canadian, we are going to want to regain control of our manufacturing, so we can manufacturing ventilators or whatever it is we need, or masks, whatever it is we need when we need it. We need to be in control of that. That is going to be an underlining theme in the years ahead. And then beyond our manufacturing, which we've decimated in the last decade, is going to be control of the natural resource inputs. And that means mining and minerals. And so I think that this is going to be a boon for North America. And I say that as Canada and the United States, who effectively will operate in tandem once we get over our petty differences. So to have a mine and metal mine or mineral interests in Canada, in the US, is going to be totally beneficial and going to be trading at a premium. And so that's what I mean by supply chain. So copper in Quebec, in a area where I think the United States is going to be the next China. Everybody's been relying on the Chinese growth, but I think the Chinese growth is going to diminish, and we're going to focus on building our stuff in our backyard because we need it. And then, of course, let's talk about a second, so not a second, but maybe a third impact is going to be Mr. Friedland was right. He's been right many times, but you know what? He hit the nail on the head. If you've ever seen him speak about copper, of which he speaks very well about, he talks about copper's miraculous ability to disinfect. And I think in the age of a pandemic, in the age of COVID, handshakes are going to be fewer and farther between. People grabbing door handles and hospital surfaces. Long story short, I think copper is going to have a new use. Everybody's been talking about how copper is going to boom because of the EV. Well, I think that absolutely is going to be part of the equation, but I think really the next boom is going to be hospitals, doorknobs, everything. This viruses simply don't exist on copper, and Mr. Friedland hit the nail on the head on his prediction there. So this is how we think about copper. I think copper actually has an extremely bright future. I think it's an amazing opportunity to be buying these things because the gold's getting all the attention. Everybody's looking left. So why don't you look right and look towards what's going to happen when you scratch a little below the surface. So speaking of infrastructure, here is a plan that was announced before it all hit the fan, so to speak. This is a plan. It's called the Grande Alliance. Pardon my French pronunciation, but this is an agreement between the the Quebec government and the Cree. And the Cree are the predominant First Nations group in the area, a very sophisticated First Nations group. And this is a $5 billion infrastructure program. I believe it falls under the Plan Nord, which is another Quebec initiative, which to me always underscores why Quebec is the best mining jurisdiction in the world for a whole host of reasons, and Plan Nord being one of them. But what I will point out right here. So why is this interesting to Power Ore specifically? We are in the town of Opemiska is in the town of Chapais, okay? Chapais is in the Chibougamau district as I'm circling here. And what you'll see right here is a rail line dotted in blue that goes over here to the Quévillon region. And why this is important is because this is going to connect to here, which is going to connect to the Horn, ultimately to the Horn smelter. So when you're talking about copper, bulk concentrates, if you will, infrastructure and transport, in particular rail transport, is super important. We always knew we had the infrastructure in the Opemiska. We have a road running right to it. We have power on site, and we have a rail line. And you can see the existing rail line is here in the nice white dots, and it goes all the way down to Saguenay. And Saguenay is where there is a tidewater port, and this is where we would sell or ship our concentrates to sell it, and we'd ship it all the way over to Finland or Sweden, where they have the smelters to turn it into a finished product. So why is this important? Okay, so this is, first of all, this is a government paid for infrastructure plan. You can see this line here in blue going over to Quévillon, paid for by the Quebec government, and it's phase 1. So this isn't phase 3, this is phase 1. It's happening very, very soon. And this is going to give us options. So we are no longer required to sell it to the Europeans. We certainly can. A concentrate will go to the highest bidder, but now we have more people bidding. So this is incredibly important. Very nice bonus. We knew they were talking about it, but here it is. So the Opemiska really is blessed with infrastructure. It's also blessed with near surface mineralization, which all comes back to the economics of this project, which we're in the process of defining, but it looks quite favorable. Talking more about Quebec and its competitive advantage. Okay, so I talked about the infrastructure. That's not necessarily specific to Quebec. That's specific to the project and how blessed it is. But we are in Quebec, and I said before, Quebec is the best place in the world to do business. Why? Flow through. That's just one example. We have an the most generous flow through regime in the country is in Quebec. And what that means effectively is that our cost of capital is lower than if we were in Ontario or anywhere else for that matter. It also has a baked in stream of investors who invest specifically and only in flow through. So take my word for it. Financing a project in Quebec is easier than anywhere else in Canada, and financing projects in Canada is easier than anywhere else in the world. So Quebec is blessed. Plan Nord, it is a long-term vision. I believe it's either $20 or $40 billion infrastructure plan over the long term, aimed at opening up the north. This is what Ontario should have and should be doing in terms of opening up its ring of fire. Well, that's what Quebec did, but they did it a long time ago, and they're seeing the results today because their north is far more open, and there are far more mineral and mining operations in Quebec happening precisely because of the government has built the infrastructure and allowed private industry to go out there and explore. And that's what we're doing, and that's why Plan Nord is so significant. Just running through the other aspects, the social and cultural aspects of mining in Quebec. The people get it, they understand it, they're comfortable with it. So the process of permitting, they understand that mining means jobs. And those who live in the north look very favorable upon mining, provided it's done in responsibility. Let's talk about the drilling. Again, this isn't necessarily Quebec-wide, but this is very specific to Power Ore and the fact that we're just outside of the town of Chapais in the Chibougamau district. We can drill here. In fact, our last campaign was done for $60 per meter. Obviously, there's more costs that go into that, but our drillers can go home at night. We don't have to build camps. They can go on and off site. The drilling is extremely efficient. And why is the benefit of that? Well, I can drill 2 meters, sometimes 4 meters for the cost of someone doing it, say, in the Ring of Fire. Great projects out there, but if you're going to drill there, it's going to cost you $500 a meter. Here, it costs us between $60 and $80. So that speaks to our cost of capital. That speaks to the drill results that come out of there. All of this is really just math when you break it down. If it's going to cost you 5 times as much to explore for it and 5 times as much to extract it, well, in theory, you have to have 5 times as rich of a deposit. You know, it's not a linear equation, but think of it like that. So you can get away with lesser grades, smaller deposits if you can find it and extract it cheaper. And if you don't have to build billion-dollar infrastructure line items like rail, road, power before going into operation, well, that just makes the payback all that quicker. That makes the deposit, once it's defined, a whole lot more economical. And anyways, that's how I feel about Quebec. We are very fortunate to be there. And so let's talk about shift our focus towards our project and talk about what the Okumuska was. And the Okumuska was 800 hectares, okay? What does that mean? What is 800 hectares? Not a lot of people can visualize that. Here's a scale here. It's not a small project, but it certainly wasn't a big project. And so this was our project in blue here. Okay, so now we're in green, but we highlighted, this is what we were prior to our announcement on February 28th. We had about 800 hectares. We had the guts of the Springer and the Perry deposits. That's where the epicenter of the known mineralization was. That's where 1.4 billion pounds of copper was extracted, mostly out of the Springer. That's where we did our drill program in 2019, where we got fantastic drill results. But as you can see, and as you will see, there's an opportunity to acquire more land. We got in this expansion, we got the Robitaille, we got the Cook, and then we got the Gwillim Fault, which I'll show you later. But I just wanted to point out that this is this is what the Okumuska and Power Ore was focused on. Now we've expanded our land package more than tenfold, and we now control 12 kilometers of the Gwillim Fault. But that's just a little visualization. Again, what Okumuska was, let's review some of the headline holes from 2019. You can always press pause and look at these more carefully, but to get almost 2.5 or over 2.5% copper equivalent over 74 meters, starting at 28 meters down hole. So that's not even at depth, that's down hole. And then another hole here, which I absolutely loved, 162 meters of copper equivalent at a smidge over 1%, starting from 3 meters downhole, so basically at your ankles. And then we had, I think we drilled 23 holes, 13 of them hit intersections over 100 meters of mineralized material. All of it was near surface. I mean, I call your attention to not just these grades and the length of these intersections, but where they started from. And so they're at 16 meters downhole, 27 meters downhole, etc. That means open pittable material. Open pittable material on a rail, on a road in Quebec, in a post-COVID world, starts to get really interesting. Here's some more. I've got 2 more slides here that show the high-grade intersections that we hit, some pretty eye-popping intersections that highlighted in red, and then some long intersections, as I said, where we hit 12 or 13 holes over 100 meters. Here they are. So press pause, take a look at them yourself. I won't go through them. But now let's talk about what Okumuska is now as of post February 28th. We made this announcement. I was incredibly excited. It took a long time to get this deal past the finish line, and we're very happy we did. But we made the announcement just before the PDAC. Everybody thought it was good times, but it couldn't have been worse timing, unfortunately. So we announced that we expanded the project with a over 9,000 hectare expansion, bringing us to about 9,900 hectares, which is about 100 square kilometers if you want to do that math. So we've got it, as we say here, a district scale Chibougamau land package. And do you know what happened when we announced it? Well, we traded down, and that's just the irrationality of a panicked market. In a COVID situation, people just threw away copper. But I think that's the exact opposite what you should be doing. This is a perfect contrarian play right now, to be honest with you. So that's the opportunity for new people getting into Power Ore. This acquisition has gone completely under the radar. but we couldn't be happier about it. So this is another look of what we have. Again, this is the Springer and the Perry. We acquired as part of this the Robotai. Okay, so the Robotai is another mine. Again, it was operated by Falconbridge as a part of the Opemiska Copper Complex. It's on the north side of the Gwillim Fault, and the Gwillim Fault here. So as we see, we've got 12 kilometers. This represents 12 kilometers of this fault. It is the regional structure, regional controlling structure for all the mineralization in the Chibougamau camp. And if you're on the north side, or if you're further away from the fault, you tend to get more copper. The closer you get to the fault, you get more gold. And so these three mines are kind of analogous. And what I mean by that is they're the same style of mineralization. You get the gold credits, ebbs and flows, but you get an excellent gold credit almost throughout. We also acquired here what's called the Cook Mine. And again, the Cook Mine was part of the Opemiska complex operated by Falconbridge, but this was a gold mine. And it had copper, had lots of copper, don't get me wrong, this is always going to be a copper play, but they were mining 5 grams per ton gold out of this, and they didn't, not an insignificant amount. 300,000 ounces, more than 300,000 ounces came out of the Cook. It shut down in the mid to late 90s, so it's got fairly recent production. So these 4 mines here are the real former producing aspects of it. We are looking at all sorts of ways to put those or at least define the geology and the economics behind putting those back into productions, not in a traditional view or how Falconbridge was mining it, but how we see it going forward, like we had defined on the Springer. As anybody who follows us knows, we were looking at sort of a malartic situation where we saw disseminated material outside of the veins. Okay, so these were underground mines. We are looking at open pitable scenarios, and these drill holes that we have here, all these multi-hundred meter intervals, is exactly the type of material that you need near surface in order to define it. So we saw a disseminated material. We proved that in our drill program of last year. And now we've got these new mines, Robotai and Cook. We're going to be applying the same techniques, exploration techniques there. We'll see if there's disseminated material on these projects. We don't know yet. And then we'll look for some blue sky, again, because this Gwillim Fault here has all sorts of potential. And outside of typical regional fault structure type mineralization, there is a VMS. We're very much in a VMS environment here. So there's all sorts of interesting exploration theses we want to test here. I will note that there's also been significant drilling, which I'll show you on this new acquisition, the new 9,000 hectares. There's lots of drilling. In fact, it was owned by a drilling company. And we believe, while they did good work, we have a different theory. Again, we sort of like having different approaches, and we learn from the work or mistakes of groups on the past. I always say I'd rather be the 10th guy on a project than the first, provided we have all of their data, and we do. And so it's our theory that a lot of the initial drill holes on this, call it the blue sky area here out to the northeast, had some great, so there's outcropping, and so they drilled it and they got some really good intersections, and then they went to go follow up, and then oftentimes they missed. And we think they missed because of a potential misinterpretation of the orientation of these veins. And if the veins were going east-west, but they were really going, a little bit more to the north, etc., the orientation of your drill could miss it. And we think that's what happened. And why do we think that? Well, we've done our homework, but we also saw that when we did our own drill program. It's very clear that the vein system over in this part is not as simplistic as running in a single direction. In fact, it runs in multiple directions. There's all sorts of folds. So we're going to go back and revisit a lot of the initial drill holes and follow it up with a different angle. And so that's part of our blue sky approach, if we can, so that, the master plan really is to put a processing facility, a mill here in the Springer area, okay? Because this is where certainly we believe, or at least as it's defined now, geologically speaking, this is where the bulk of the material is going to be. We're going to be doing some work on Perry, certainly Robotai, and out here. If we can grow our tons, then we really think we're going to have an economic situation to justify building the mill and the capex, but that's what it's all about. So if we can find new near surface deposits in this area, then we're in business. And obviously you can see through all the drill holes that we've had, the historical drilling that's been done on the property, pretty spectacular stuff here. This is all historical drilling. This wasn't us. This is drilling that was done on the new property. So nice copper, excellent copper, good grade, 19 grams over 1.5 meter. We've even got some zinc. So that's where we see, the VMS style mineralization here, the Blondeau VMS style in here. And I'll note in the next slide here. So this is the same land package I was showing you before. This is where we control. This is called the Scott Lake deposit. This is a VMS deposit. It's quite sizable. We believe on its own. It's not economic. It's controlled by a company called Yorbo. I do believe that it probably would fit well into our company if the opportunity was right. It's a zinc rich, but it's got lots of copper as well. And it's all part of the same system going on the Gwillim Fault, which runs like so, and it runs all the way over to the Chibougamau camp. Here we have Doré Copper. They're a new company. They've got half of the Chibougamau camp, and the other is by another company called Chibougamau Independent. So there is a whole lot of activity, as we say, a Chibougamau renaissance happening in this district. It's got, over here we've got lots of former producing smaller scale mines relative to the Springer and the Perry for sure. But interesting production, and we're more than happy to have good neighbors. We know all three management teams here. They're all good groups. Everybody's having trouble in a copper market, of course, but we do think this area has the opportunity for a large mining company to come here and just take the whole thing out. That is going to happen. That is going to happen. When, that I can't tell you. So some key points, just running it over here. We got 10,000 hectares. We've got 12 kilometers of the Gwillim. Power ore is very much focused on copper, and it is a very copper rich environment. However, it's got lots of gold, and we'll just show you that right here. As I said before, it's got over 320,000 ounces of gold. That's not an insignificant gold producer. Excellent grades. They're very different style of mineralization than the copper deposits on the northern side of the Gwillim Fault. So this is new, and we've got lots of work here. So expect us not to jump on the gold bandwagon, but it's part of the package, and we're more than happy to have it in this copper gold environment. Here are some intersections. We've put it in copper equivalent, but you can see there's lots of gold, and then you can also see zinc, lead, silver, which again lends to the VMS theory. It's not a theory, it's a fact. And these are the styles, these are the typical metals you'll see in a VMS situation. But there's also the copper gold veins, which again wouldn't be considered a VMS. Nonetheless, lots of metal here, polymetallic situations, but when you put it all out in the copper equivalent, and we do the math at spot prices, we always do, and you see some pretty interesting intersections here with pretty rich copper, all in our project, all historical work. And as I said, we acquired this, we got an absolutely phenomenal deal, yet the market hasn't realized this. So past producing mines, I won't get too much into this, but everybody talks about how important Chibougamau was, but really it's Chapet, and Chapet is the Opemiska. And our properties, the properties that are under Power Ore's control, were the absolute dominant projects in the area, and they're under our total control right now. A lot of numbers here, but the bottom line is very simple. 1.4 billion pounds of copper, 1 million ounces of gold were pulled out of the properties we have here. They were pulled out under high-grade vein systems. We are looking at it as a bulk tonnage situation. There could be underground situation, but really we have a great start on the Springer, and we're going to look to build ounces, pounds, and tons as we move this forward vis-a-vis the drill bit. And how are we going to do that? What is the plan? How are we going to move our projects? Well, we have a two-pronged approach. The first approach is exactly what we have been doing on the Springer and the Perry, and that is to delineate resources in and around the existing or former producing mines, Springer, Perry, Cook, Robitaille. We've got a great head start. We've done a lot of that work. Expect us to do more because of our views on different interpretations and frankly our success of defining that thesis, which again has gone largely overlooked, but in time it will not. So that's the first prong. The second prong is discovery. Discovery along the north as it goes north-northwest along the Gwillim Fault. We have 4 different styles of mineralization. I talked about those before, whether it's the Opemiska copper gold or the Opemiska gold copper, and that depends whether you are on the north or the south side of the fault towards the west of the project, or how close you are to the actual Gwillim. As I said, the closer you are to the Gwillim, the more gold we tend to see. And then there's other blue sky along that 12 kilometers, and we call that the Blondeau or the Scott Lemoyne type VMS. So basically VMS where you're going to see gold and copper, but additionally to that, you're going to get zinc, lead, and silver, polymetallic. So there's all sorts of exploration. Blue sky, again, our strategy on the blue sky, it's not green fields, far from it. There's been a lot of drilling, as I said here. This is the drill results on the new acquisition that we've made. Pretty good start, actually, but it's all about the follow-up, and that's what we're going to go do. We're going to go confirm these holes, and then we're going to step out and see if we can connect the zones. Again, using that different concept of maybe they didn't fully understand the orientation of these veins. And if we're right, that could be quite significant, and again, that would put us in business. So that's our two-prong approach: discovery and working what we know is there and what we can grow. Okay, here's the other thing, the little teaser I talked to you about. I won't get into details. It's a work in progress, but also 3 days before we made the announcement of the acquisition of the expansion, we announced that we're selling our man mine, and we sold our man mine to a company called Ryder Investment Capital Corporation. That company, Ryder, is a CPC. For those of you who don't know what a CPC is, it's effectively nothing more than a brand new clean shell with cash. It's got a listing on the Toronto Venture Exchange, but it requires what's called a qualifying transaction. And a part of a qualifying transaction, it needs a 43-101 project. And we own the man mine, and I really like the man mine. It's a silver cobalt project, and that was the firstborn child of Power Ore, but it had new children in the Opemiska, which it's focused its entire attention and resources towards. So we had this really good asset, has a lot of value on it, a lot of potential, but we weren't doing anything with it. And so I met a guy, and his name is James Sykes. And James Sykes, for those of you who don't know him, Google him. He is responsible for finding the Arrow deposit in Saskatchewan. And what is the Arrow deposit? The Arrow deposit is NexGen. And what is NexGen? NexGen is the best uranium company that has yet to be bought by all the major uranium companies like Cameco. So I won't get into the dynamics of uranium, but when uranium takes off again, and eventually it will, NexGen's the first one to be bought out. Simple as that. And James is the guy who found it. It's that simple. So I had the pleasure of meeting him a number of months ago, and we came to an agreement where basically Ryder Investment Capital Corporation is going to change its name. It's going to be called soon, once the qualifying transaction is closed, it's going to be called Baseload Energy, and it's going to be James's vehicle. And our group is going to get behind it. So we are going to back James to go out there and find new deposits, just like he found the Arrow. James is going to find something else. He's a young guy. He lives and breathes uranium. In fact, he was born in Elliott Lake, believe it or not, and that's probably why he got into uranium. Not that there's too many economic deposits in Elliott Lake, but that is uranium town, so to speak. So James is young, he's smart, and as I said, he lives and breathes exploration. And so that's what Ryder is ultimately going to be. Ryder is going to be Baseload Energy, and Baseload is going to be James's vehicle. And we're going to be closing this qualifying transaction very soon. Right now, Power Ore, in exchange for selling the man, 100% owns 80% of Baseload. So we are in control of Baseload. And obviously that position is going to be diluted down with the qualifying transaction. Anybody interested in the qualifying transaction, reach out to me. On the next slide are going to be my contacts. we are putting that together. I'm going to be a shareholder, of course. I'm a shareholder in all of my companies, and any company I'm involved with, I get no free shares. So I pay in the private placements just like everybody else, or I buy in the market. I do that quite frequently, and there's an opportunity to buy into baseload early. There's 22 million shares outstanding. As I said, Power Ore owns 80% of those, about 17.8 million. Those aren't going anywhere anytime soon, so it's an extremely tight float with a very smart, bankable geologist and businessman getting behind this. He is really an impressive guy, and I'm excited to be involved and back him financially, corporately, any way I can. So that's the big news on Ryder, or shall I say baseload. And for those of you who would like to contact me, again, my name is Stephen Stewart. I'm the CEO of Power Ore. My contacts are here, and I'll leave you with this, my favorite picture from a drill intersection on the Opemiska. This comes right from the crown pillar. It's 17% copper with 1.7 gold. And I'll leave you with that because that's what's drew us to the Opemiska. So thank you for your time, and I look forward to speaking with you.